Good time zone, sweet world. It is Tuesday, July 8th, 2025. Hello, welcome into the Anch Show, a broadcast about the video games industry. Hello, my name's Anch. I am a video gamist. I play, talk, and write about video games. But also, I am an accountant and a former economist, I guess. And so I talk about the business side of video games too. That is the general run of this show. We'll talk about games that we've been playing. We'll also dig into the news a little bit about all the different headlines that have been going on. We try to keep it tight, try to keep it beneath an hour. Sometimes we go over. But hey, welcome. Segment one, games we've been playing, not much. So segment one's done. Pokemon Yellow. That's really it. Pokemon Yellow and Phantasy Star online. Episode 1 and 2 plus on GameCube. But boy, it's been hard to really fit in much else around there. Also started, oh my goodness. Oh, the End God. Thanks for calling. Not much else has been going on. Also started a game design course of all things as I try to figure out what to do here. But hey, let's get right into it then. Let's talk about the news. I wanted to rewind a little bit and talk about some U.S. consumer sentiment stuff. This was looking into Dring's relatively new kind of publication here. Well, it's a Substack, really. I'd be careful about the word publication, but yeah, it's a independent Substack being funded by Jeff Keighley. So in this, he was quoting when they did the Summer Games Fest, a month ago, I guess at this point. They had Matt Piscatella, who's at Circana, come in and talk a little bit about the industry in quarter one results. And, there was a section here talking about tailwinds and headwinds. And item number one on tailwinds was cooling inflation. You'll see, you might see some video game reporters or, people who write on video game websites citing high inflation even in 2025. And I think that's not true. It's, in 2023, it might have been true. In 2024, it might have been true. In 2025, I don't think that's really factually true. The latest numbers out of StatCan for Canada is like 1.7% inflation overall basket. And for USA, I think it's like 2.35%. So like straight off the bat, that's kind of where that's at. But the headwinds are, like factually, there are a lot of them, which are people, this is particularly in the US, but I think it's going to be true in many consumer markets. And it's going to, or in global kind of markets. I am based in Canada, yes. They're talking about savings depletion, about increased household debt, higher prices, and just overall declining consumer sentiment. And now with all the tariff stuff, there's also just uncertainty over costs and price levels because of all this stuff. And even today, we had a bunch of stuff come out on copper and pharmaceuticals, I think, as well. So this is causing a lot of kind of mayhem, really. But they noted in Q1, retail spending was still resilient. So if I see here, Q1 retail spending is resilient. Retail sales up 4.6% across all categories. This is despite a slump in GDP, with economic growth down 0.3%. Inflation up 2.4%. So consumers were spending more during the first quarter of the year. However, later on in here, they kind of talk about how the increase in spend was due to food prices. And when you look at number of products sold, beverage sales were flat, non-edible goods were down 1%, and general merchandise was down 2%. And so people were spending more on food because it costs more, and therefore they were spending less everywhere else. But all of that still, notwithstanding all of that, people still love video games. People are still very excited. And it all comes back to kind of this idea of what's the value for money type of argument that you can make. And you know what? I might as well just play a snippet here to hear it from Matt himself. So let's just do that.
Yes, at 9, whatever time it is in the morning. But our outlook for the games industry spending in the US this year has also swung pretty wildly. Coming into this year, we had a 4.3% growth forecast. Of course, it helped that GTA 6 was still in the year. And it sure helped that we didn't have the tariff situation and some of these other situations we're seeing right now. As of the moment, though, we're looking at about a down 4.7% outlook, really impacting all areas of spend. Mobile struggling a little bit this year. The console world, of course, has been struggling going into the launch of the Switch 2. We'll see how powerful and sustained that launch is. But generally, we have a consumer who's a little bit concerned. They're holding back a little bit, and they really need to be pushed with the concept of value for their gaming dollar. So, what to watch going forward? Number one, people still love video games. I mean, we've seen it the last couple of days. We've seen it in the response to Switch 2. People are still very, very excited. Of course they are. It's a wonderful category that continues to do some amazing things, but they're looking for certain things. Number one, they're looking for value. And I know we've been doing a lot of $80 games and subscriptions and free to play and all these other things happening. No matter what, the consumer has to believe they're getting a good value for their dollar. Number two, the ease of accessibility is a huge factor. Really what I'm talking about here is the Fortnite factor. We have the $80 games, and that will work for some games and some consumers. But for younger consumers in particular, the biggest competitor at any new game is going to be Fortnite because it's so easy to access. They can play it wherever they are, whenever they want to. So the more easily accessible games are, the better it's going to be in this particular market environment. Subscription boost may continue. We saw a subscription market boom in the pandemic window, and then it flattened, was flat for a couple of years. It had a little bit of an uptick when Call of Duty made it to Game Pass, but after that, we saw an uptick again in February and in March and in April. Now that could be content related, but it also could be consumers saying, hey, I want to have better value for my dollar. So I'm going to, lean into those categories that could deliver that. So just keep that in mind. Keep an eye on that. I'll keep talking about that in the future. And finally, one of the things that may impact it hasn't quite impacted us yet in all categories, although it has in some. Higher prices and potential supply shortages in the US could certainly exacerbate the challenges we're facing. So big, crazy market. But the key takeaways are we are seeing some shifting in dollars away from general merchandise categories to things like food. The consumer is hyper fixated on value, and the consumer response to things like tariffs continues to be in flux. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more of a foundation. Hopefully that wasn't too painful, and hopefully the topics after will be a lot more fun to chat about.
All right, so there's Matt. Right. I love Matt Piscatella. But that's really what I kind of refer to when I go back and say, this, as he calls it, the hyper fixation on value. I think there's some interesting things there as well to think about on subscription services. And there was some stuff in the news about, Game Pass in general that I think, we should probably get into, but we'll get there. I think, other things they had said here, coming into the year, Circana was forecasting 4.6% growth. GTA 6 was still in the year at that time when they forecasted that. And tariffs were kind of not on the scene as yet. But given, GTA 6 being moved out of the year and given all this craziness around tariffs, they're forecasting a bit of a contraction of the industry. So they're down 4.7% is the forecast, which would mean the industry size, they put it at the US size, 56.5 billion. Last week, we talked a little bit about the Canadian industry size, which in 2024 was put at $5.1 billion Canadian. So this is 56.5 billion US. is what the forecast is for the end of the year. So let's move on from there. That's good context, though, to set kind of the table for the rest of the stuff. And you know what? I mean, we're going to move on to Xbox layoffs, which, we had kind of called out a couple of weeks ago that we knew they were coming because of Jay Schreier, but also because, Phil Spencer had said that they were coming and that more waves would come. It's just now they have come, and now they're in the kind of in the hive mind of video games that we're talking about all this kind of stuff. But this is, so we'll start with Bloomberg, right? So Microsoft Gaming Division laid off hundreds of employees. We know this, touching Candy Crush, touching ZeniMax, Raven Software, Sledgehammer, Halo Studios, Turn 10 Studios. Specifically, people were up in arms about Everwild and Perfect Dark as specific projects that had been canceled. So here, and also, so the Initiative Studio also closed. The handling of the layoff stuff was kind of upsetting, I guess, to put it the least. Is like, again, not very professional. Some of the handling, some of the stuff with ZeniMax was unfortunate because ZeniMax was, recently, I think a portion of their staff was unionized. It was like the QA staff, but still, some of the unionized staff were let go, and so Microsoft had to contact the union first before they could contact the employees, and that left the employees kind of just waiting. They were in limbo, waiting to find out the status of whether or not they have a job. There was some more stuff out here. The general corporate messaging is layoffs are part of a strategy to prioritize growth areas, increase agility, and reduce layers of management, which, I think, we'll get to the corporate messaging afterwards. So one of the other projects that they had canceled was a project called Blackbird. And this was a third-person online shooter, right? And this was put here. Blackbird's cancellation was particularly shocking because it had blown away executives at Xbox just a few months ago. During the demonstration in March, Spencer was enjoying the game so much that Matt Booty, the head of the head of Xbox Game Studios, had to pull the controller away so they could keep the meeting going. But the thing here, though, is you have to kind of, what it made me think of, as I go through the list of these different games. You look at Blackbird, okay, so third-person online shooter. And you look at Everwild, action adventure, but also really long in development time, like over 5 years, it looks like. And there were like some quotes out there that were saying, kind of acknowledging a long development time, but Spencer going on record saying, they have time, we can give them time. Perfect Dark, action adventure, first-person shooter. The Romero game, which I guess we'll get to. I think another shooter. All of these things. And then, the things that are not canceled or that will never be canceled. Like the new or like the DLC to Indiana Jones or whatever they're doing there. A first-person action adventure game. A Call of Duties. Multiplayer, online, first-person shooters. Right. So it just feels like there's a lot of overlap in all these different genres of stuff that they have going on. And they have a whole bunch of like different projects that they're working on actively that we might not even know about. Right. And so it just strikes me as, they're looking at a risk perspective to see what are the things that are highest risk in terms of, we could spend a whole lot more into these things, release them, and they might not meet all, the numbers move that we need them to move, basically. Right. is kind of where I go, and then just the overlap of all the different things that you have going on. And so I think Turn 10 also is another one of these situations where they just couldn't get what they needed out of Forza. And do they really need multiple driving games in the mix? I think they already have one with. Do they have another Forza? They have like a Forza Horizon game as well. But anyway. So yeah, and then the whole Romero thing as well. I think there was. Let's see here. If I can find it here. This is the Romero game article. No, thank you, VGC. So there was like, there was a bunch of stuff circling around saying that Romero Games has been closed, and then Romero Games had to come out with a statement saying, we want to address recent reports regarding the status of Romero Games. These reports have contained inaccuracies. The funding of our project was pulled. Our game was canceled. And as a result, they have to reassess the entire staffing of the studio. Romero Games is not closed. We're doing everything in our power to ensure that it does not come to that. Any suggestion otherwise is factually incorrect. Indeed, we were in the studio today to discuss next steps of the team. Anyway, they've been contacted by several publishers. And so I think, Romero Games is in a position, a unique position there. With this person has so much, I should say stock, but he has so much like social capital built up about who he is as a developer and as a person here in the industry that I think it won't be difficult for him to find another publisher to step in. Also, this is a game that is like a long way into development and has had a lot of funding already invested into it. And so, another publisher can easily kind of step in and it should be appealing to them because it should be kind of we can pull this across the line type of thing. Which, I don't know, was my first reaction when I saw all this stuff. But then also I started thinking like, oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I had just thought that maybe Microsoft would have, or Xbox rather, would have had a little bit more control over, if we're going to kick in funds for this, how free are you to finish the project if we just decide to cancel it, right? But so that's one angle of all of this. I think if I go back to GameFile on this and some of the stuff that they had in here, so this was some of the corporate stuff that was out here. To position gaming for enduring success. Allow us to focus on strategic growth areas. We will end or decrease work in certain areas of the business and follow Microsoft's lead in removing layers of management. I recognize these changes come at a time when we have more players, games, and gaming hours than ever before. Our platform, hardware, and game roadmap have never looked stronger. The success we're seeing currently is based on tough decisions we've made previously. On cuts, we must make choices now for continued success in future years, and a key part of that strategy is the discipline to prioritize the strongest opportunities. We'll protect what is thriving and concentrate effort on areas with the greatest potential, while delivering on the expectations the company has for our business. This focused approach means we can deliver exceptional games and experiences for players for generations to come. Now, the problem with all this kind of stuff is, sure, they had some mishaps in Xbox, and sure, you can go over the whole tale from 360 to now, and there are plenty of people who are out there who have done all of that. But in recent memory, it's not like they've been doing a whole lot wrong. They've been on a bit of a tear. They've been having some really strong releases out there on Game Pass, and just in general out of Xbox Studios, and they've been making some interesting moves in handhelds and all this kind of stuff. And if you go to, let's see here. This is a link to the, I think this is most recent quarterly reporting for Microsoft. And you go all the way to page 36. The two numbers to look at here. If we look at more personal computing, gaming revenue. Gaming revenue increased $270 million or 5%, driven by growth in Xbox content and services. Xbox content and services revenue increased 8%, driven by growth in Xbox Game Pass, Call of Duty, and Minecraft. Xbox hardware revenue decreased 6%, which, okay. But hey, like, it's not nothing. But the problem is, if we go look at the AI stuff that they have going on, right? They have, I think, 4.5 billion intelligent cloud. 4.6 billion or 21%, right? Server products and cloud services revenue increased $4.5 billion or 22%, driven by Azure and other cloud services. Azure and other cloud services revenue grew by 33%, driven by demand for our portfolio of services, including 16 points from our AI services. Server products revenue decreased 6%. So, the gaming side of the house is kind of like is jumping, and the Azure cloud services and AI services part of the house is leaping, vaulting. And so, this explains some of the reporting that is out there around what's motivating workforce cuts overall by the parent company, right? And that can get us into, of course, I won't be able to log into this account here because I'm on the wrong profile. I can open this up here. So this is FT reporting, right? And so I turned to the Financial Times reporting to go look at some quotes out here. So, Microsoft is streamlining its operations at a time when major technology companies are dealing with economic uncertainty under US President Donald Trump and grappling with the financial sustainability of vast artificial intelligence investments. We continue to implement organizational changes necessary to best position the company and teams for success in a dynamic marketplace, the company said. Microsoft has not explicitly attributed the latest cuts to AI, despite Chief Executive Satya Nadella previously stating that as much as a third of the company's code is now written by software. Regulatory filings in Washington state, where it is headquartered, showed software engineers made up 40% of roughly 2,000 roles axed in May this year. The software giant has pledged to spend $80 billion on data center infrastructure in the fiscal year ending June 30th. It has positioned itself at the center of a race to commercialize the technology. So, you put all of this stuff together, and you come to a place where, the gaming side of the house is being impacted by the parent company that is, really prioritizing where its funds need to go into the AI stuff. And let me just get chat back open. I lost chat. There we go. So, you just imagine Phil Spencer and company basically receive an email that tells them in certain terms, we need either X% needs to be cut, which I think the number being floated around is 4%, or it is, a salary dollar number, or, a number of FTEs or full-time equivalents that need to be cut. And now they have to kind of go through their stack of projects and see what needs to get cut, right? So that really is the context to lay around here. I don't know. I find that a little bit more useful context than just saying fuck Microsoft, which is some of the analysis that we get in here. So I don't know. Cool. I mean, overall, like the overall look for, if you're a games enthusiast and you're in this kind of thing, then yeah, of course, like, you're upset. You're upset with Microsoft, and you're upset with where these studios are, what has happened to the studios. You're upset that people have been affected, that projects that you were interested in have been canned, and so of course I understand that. But hey, anyway, there's always nuance in this stuff, and it's good to understand it. That's all. That's really all I kind of had on the whole Xbox thing to talk about. I think there was another couple of things here, though. One thing is the Game Pass stuff, and so this is a little bit problematic too. There was some tweets, or Blue Skies, I think, tweets by Dring, Christopher Dring, saying that I asked for clarification on the Game Pass is profitable claim and was told no first-party costs are included. And there's a thread here on Reset Era that, kind of explains, what costs are contained, what costs aren't. Costs associated with the Game Pass business is fees paid to third parties, marketing, service costs, and by that measure, it's profitable. What they don't count is the lost revenue that Xbox's first-party studios are seeing as a result of the service. I have to imagine that if first-party studios receive similar compensation, that profitability might not be correct. Which, I mean, when you're talking about this, you're talking about opportunity cost, is what you're talking about, right? And you're saying that there is some, because Game Pass exists, then there's some value of the title that Game Pass has moved over to, that some value of revenue from that we won't see anymore. Can we quantify that and then include that as a cost that nets against some revenue that we're getting from this subscription service, right? That's what they're talking about there. Now, here's the thing. There is financial reporting, and then there's management accounting, right? So really, financial accounting and management accounting, those are two very separate things and very different things. If you look at the financial statements, right, here, you look at the financial statements, this is financial accounting. And this has a very specific way of being done, and there are specific concepts that are involved in all of this kind of stuff. There was another one of these articles here. I think it might have been an interview with Mr. Colantonio, who was Arcane founder. Kind of, I don't want to say ranting, but kind of ranting in a sense on the cuts, and criticizing Game Pass and giving out opinions on how he thinks that it is damaging for the industry. One of the things though that, well, I mean, it certainly caught my attention because, again, I'm an accountant, is this characterization. I want to see if it's actually in here. No, it's not. So there's some other article that I saw. He characterized amortization as a spreadsheet trick. And let me go ahead and say that amortization is not a spreadsheet trick. So if I come back to the financial accounting of Game Pass, or just generally financial accounting, when you spend a whole bunch of money acquiring rights, you're spending a whole bunch of money on something that you think that if I get this thing, I can benefit from this over a long period of time. And you might even say that I think that I can benefit, for example, over 5 years. And so from a financial reporting perspective, would it be more correct to say, well, I spent all the money now, so I should just show it all now as an expense now? And whatever revenue I get against all these rights that I acquired, then it'll show some sort of net loss for the year because I spent way more money on rights than I could possibly generate in revenue today. And then as time goes on, maybe I'll keep making revenue over the next 5 years, and maybe eventually I'll start to see a positive return. And that's kind of what some of the people here are essentially talking about. Like when they're saying like, oh, this is not profitable, right? They're looking at all of the different costs that were involved. From a financial reporting perspective, though, you don't do that because you say, well, there are certain costs that go into assets that have long lives, and those sit on the balance sheet. And then you say that there is some part of this asset that relates to my ability in this year, in this period, to make money. And so in this period, in this year, when I go report to all different people that I need to report to, I can tell them this is how much revenue I made this year, and this is how many expenses I took on as a result. And all that money you spent on all of those rights, for example, that were put into an asset, a portion of that becomes expense. Typically, it's just straight line is what they call it. And so it's, for example, if you have a 5-year asset, then you divide that value by 5. And that 1 year, at the end of 1 year, when you go report your expense, you take amortization expense. And so, that's kind of, hey, the value of this asset is being depreciated over time. And that is when the expense comes into your income statement. And you do that over 5 years. And it has this smoothing effect on presenting how profitable you are from a financial reporting perspective. That's how it's done. It's not a spreadsheet trick. However, so from a management accounting perspective, then, when you're looking at whether or not Game Pass is profitable, I guarantee you that when they're looking at this, probably how they do this, because again, like the Xbox division is like I think I said 20,000 staff. Like they're a big division. They sit within Microsoft. Guaranteed, they have corporate accounting people that are there that help with all this kind of stuff, right? And so, and management accounting is very much internal stuff. So they will never publish stuff, and endless amounts of journalists can go and they can ask all the questions they want, and they'll be very tight-lipped and whatever, because this is very sensitive information that all kinds of competitors would love to get their hands on, because they'd really love to know what are the impacts of Game Pass on video game sales, so that they can understand, what if we want to do a subscription service? How would that affect our first party sales? Or how is this impacting Xbox? What does that mean for us in terms of when we're trying to line up our different releases compared to when we think Xbox is going to line up their different releases? So of course they're going to be tight-lipped. But so management accountants, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, again, for example, we plan to purchase Activision, and we think it's going to cost us 69 billion or whatever it is. Maybe it was 72, whatever. Let's just say 70 billion. They would have said, okay, fine. We have all these like initial outlay costs, and we'll put them all here in column A. We have our initial outlay. And then they'll look at inflows and they'll see, okay, well, Game Pass revenue, fine. Then they'll look at first party sale revenue, fine, right? And if you list all your revenue sources from the different properties, you have less of a need to consider opportunity costs. But also, if you list all your revenue, then what they'll start to do is they will start to put assumptions inside all of these kind of revenue streams that they're forecasting out, right? And so I don't know, they could do like 5-year, 8-year. I think typically we're talking about net present value analysis. So they're putting, okay, column 1 you have all your costs, and column 2 is like year 1, and so on, and right 3, 4, 5. Then you're going each year out, and you might say, okay, I think it's this much revenue for Game Pass. And then this first party title that is on Game Pass, we think it'll cannibalize by X%. And so we'll carry that percentage through into that line and account for the cannibalization. And then, they'll list all the costs, list all the revenues, they'll tally it up each year, and then they'll have some sort of it's called a discount rate. A discount rate is basically a required rate of return is another way to look at it. It's like it's a required rate of return that also covers the cost of debt. And so all of these companies they'll have their measure of how much their debt costs, and therefore, and also whatever return they need to make on top of it, also referred to as a hurdle rate sometimes. And so guaranteed, like they'll be mapping all that stuff out to see, like, do we think this is going to be profitable before we go make the decision? And usually the answer is yes before they say they commit to it, right? But it's, Game Pass has been on for 8 years now, so I think it is highly unlikely that that I think it's highly unlikely that that Game Pass bleeds money. That's basically where I'm at with it. It's what I'm trying to communicate anyway. Again, guaranteed that in all of their kind of forecasting exercises and all this kind of stuff, that they're listing all of these different revenue streams in comparison to the costs that it took to get them there. That's how you'll know whether the decision was a good one or not. So that's Game Pass. That's all I really wanted to say on Game Pass. I just want to get to Stop Killing Games real quick. So I had largely avoided talking about Stop Killing Games because it was, entrenched in YouTube drama, which I'm not about. And I don't really have much else to add here. I think, from a consumer rights perspective, sure. I think it's a good thing, a good movement to create, to try and push for rather better consumer rights in video games. But unsurprising that a video game lobbying group in Europe has kind of, I wouldn't say struck back, but they have put their position down. And, I think at this point, the Stop Killing Games is over the 1 million petitionees. 1 million people have signed the petition. And so, the European legislature will have to respond somehow. And so Video Games Europe has kind of put out a position paper that was kind of interesting to look at. But if we look at some of this stuff here, you know what? It's fine. Let's just go straight to the paper because we'll get through some of the points here. It's only 5 pages long, which I think is kind of not great for a position paper. Also, yeah. Anyway, let's start at the top. So, the video games industry is committed to consistently providing players with high quality interactive gaming experiences. Decision to discontinue a video game's online services is multifaceted and is never taken lightly and must always be a matter of choice. When it does happen, the industry ensures that players are given fair notice of prospective changes in compliance with local consumer protection laws. The right to decide how, when, and for how long to make an online video game and online video game services, available to players is vital in justifying this cost and fostering continued technical innovation. As rights holders and economic entities, video games companies must remain free to decide when an online game is no longer commercially viable and to end continued server support for that game. Imposing a legal obligation to continue server support indefinitely or to develop online video games in a specific technical manner that will allow for permanent use will raise the costs and risks of developing such games. So I think the first thing to kind of step back and look at here is this claim that it's imposing a legal obligation to continue server support indefinitely, because I don't think that's really what's being asked for anyway. I don't know that this petition is really asking for that. It's just asking for some sort of end of life plan for certain video games to give the player a way to play the game. I think, I tried to go back and play Tribes Ascend recently, in the recent past, at least in the last year. And you can connect to the game, but they're like, I don't know. I think I did connect to a server, actually. So maybe this is a bad example. But I mean, functionally, I couldn't play the game, though, because there was no, there weren't any bots. I couldn't start a game, but I guess, like, in some sense, even that game, if the petition was to be honored, if I was to go connect to that game and boot it up, then I should have some way to actually play that game, is basically what they're saying. So I don't know, maybe in that situation, if I go in, there would be bots, and the game would start and I would be able to enjoy it. Just the way that I did all the way back when I was playing the damn thing. But I understand increasing the risks because, there are security concerns for sure, right? Which they'll get into, reputational, safety, and security concerns. Let's see. It's not clear what the initiators of the Stop Killing Games petition seek to achieve as legal change. It appears that... So, let's see here. There is a... Can I search through text in this? I can. Status quo is kind of what I want to... Yes, okay. I remember this paragraph. This paragraph is important to me. So all video games, whether digital or physical copies, are licensed. As is the case with virtually all digital works when consumers purchase online games, regardless of the country of sale, what they acquire is a personal license to access and play the copy of the game they have purchased, in accordance with the game's terms of service. The consumer does not acquire ownership of that video game. These clear intellectual property rights underpin the entire market and enable the strong investment that the industry has seen for decades. There is no legal uncertainty about the status quo of video games. I think that's a really important paragraph there, because video games are often, I feel like they're often marketed to us as we are buying this thing and therefore we are owning this thing and we own something, right? And that was especially true when you had, sometimes still have, but mostly past tense now, when you had physical copies of games. You had something physical and tangible to hold on to, and you really felt like you owned that thing. But I think even in that case, even though you hold a physical cartridge, you still don't actually own that thing. All you own is the license to the software that's on that thing, right? That's a much less sexy way to market, though, to say that you're buying a license, right? And so if this is legally not in question, and if this is indeed the status quo, then I think we need to push for a little bit more transparency and clarity on that, to constantly remind us that, you know what, no, we're not buying this. I don't own. I don't know. Pick a Steam game. I don't own any of those. I just own licenses to each of those individual things, and someday in the future, that license could be revoked. They could choose to revoke the license, and I would have no recourse. And 20 years on, whatever, what do I care? Or what am I going to do about it? But that's essentially, I mean, you're basically counting on that, right? And then, you want that to happen anyway, because you want people to go buy the next game, right? And I don't know, and there was some law that had come out in California that did push for some more clarity around this and did require Steam to make some changes on how they did stuff. But I think that specifically is somewhere where we need to have a constant reminder and more clarity around this stuff. If that's really, if that's really how the industry wants to frame this issue, then we need to have, we need to stop having things sold to us as if we are owning them, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at. Okay. So we come to the part of here where they're trying to list out some of their arguments, I guess. Right? So here are the ways in which players and companies would be affected. Player safety, reduced or no player protection. Requiring games to run on private servers would result in the inability for games companies to continue to protect players from illegal or harmful content or conduct, as moderation and player safety teams would no longer be involved. I get this to a certain extent, absolutely. I also think, though, that in some cases, like we're kind of, and they probably get into this more, but these kind of environments where I feel like we're talking about private servers here, private servers that run, games, now defunct games. I think about Ragnarok Online, for example. So many private servers, right? And each one of those private servers, right, you go to the good ones anyway, they have brilliant management and brilliant kind of moderation and all this kind of stuff, right? They build their own kind of thing. These communities are many, and they build in ways to police themselves, and are also like, they always have to be very careful because they know that they're operating in some sort of gray area, and could easily have the copyright holder chasing after them, right? And so anyway, they're saying this though because you want control ultimately over your copyright, and you don't want that to be eroded. And so I guess that's really why this is here. Increased security risks, I do understand. That releasing binaries could expose companies themselves to data breaches and DDoS, and that's real. And I don't really know what the solution is around that. Impact on companies. So this will be fun. Significant engineering and architectural challenges. Allowing players to run private servers would present significant engineering architectural challenges for many games due to the way in which online features are integrated with other proprietary systems and services required for the game. Creating a private server compatible version would be a prohibitive cost, in some cases years or decades after the game's initial release, when only a small audience remains. I don't know that Stop Killing Games was asking for the creation of private servers. I think they're more so asking one of the things is, if you don't want to do anything with this, at least let us run our private servers and stop coming after us, I think is more the thing here. Negative impact on investment in games, jobs, growth, and consumer choice. I think this whole point number 4 is kind of bunk. And I think also, if you think about this position paper, the target audience is really the regulator or the policymakers, right? This line will be very triggering for policymakers because this is very politically motivated. This is a line that really attacks, the votes hinge on these words, particularly jobs and growth. And so what they're saying here is ensuring an online game can work without official service support requires a significant investment of engineering resources. Many costs that would have to be incurred towards the end of commercial life, when it's no longer commercially viable to continue support. Requirements to implement such plans could lead to less risk-taking, fewer investment projects in developing new games, and potentially fewer jobs. Could lead to increased costs for consumers and less choice. Here's the thing. Costs are already increasing. Now, if you're worried about, incurring costs toward the end of life, when it is no longer commercially viable to continue support, I think many of these companies have such high margins and returns that it's very difficult to argue that they don't have the room to budget additional costs against these things. I think it's another reason why you really do need regulatory change around this kind of stuff to just institute the rules. Because once the rules come in place and once they're in place stable in a kind of a stable fashion, then all these companies don't really have a choice but to adjust, and they'll adjust. You allocate budgets. You allocate longer term budgets against all these new requirements. Basically, is what it is. And this whole thing is just, this whole point number 4 here is just speaking towards like, we'd rather not do anything differently, because it would cost us more to do it. So let's not do that. Regarding the requirement to implement new plans could lead to less risk taking. Sure, that might be good though, because I think that there is like overall, like industry wide, these are really risky projects, and sometimes there are a lot of misses and a lot of bets that maybe should have been thought through a bit more. And I think they could do with a little bit less risk taking. I don't really understand the potentially fewer jobs aspect of this. It's because of how many layoffs that we've been seeing anyway, you kind of get the sense that it's like, well, you were going to cut staff anyway, weren't you? So I don't know about that. And then as far as saying less choice, I don't buy that in a second, because there are just so many different games out there to play. Discoverability is such a huge issue across all kinds of platforms. So it's not that we'll have reduced choice. Increased cost for consumers, I don't know. I mean, I said, of course, all costs are increasing, but specifically, if you had these new requirements come in, sure, there might be some pass through. But I think interestingly, companies would have they would find it hard to increase prices any more than they already are, right? And so I fail to see how this specific regulatory change would push the needle on individual game costs here. So yeah, reputational harm is their next point here, which I understand. That makes sense. You would be concerned about all kinds of different people running private servers, being allowed to run private servers without any control by the copyright holder. But again, like there has to be some sort of system in place to allow it to happen. I think it would be it would be nice if somehow the regulators could create some sort of framework that would allow for people to carry out the private servers, but also then to take on the risk and basically take on any liability for anything that could happen, anything negative, anything that could go wrong, that could then cause financial damages, for the people who run the private servers to take on that liability explicitly by law. And that means we're at the hour mark already, so I gotta hurry it up. I gotta wrap it up. They go on to talk about impact on IP rights, which, I mean, let's see here. There's nothing too much that stood out. I mean, it's such an IP driven market, I guess, that this is any kind of erosion against it is going to be a kind of sore sticking point. It's funny that they talk about competition from community supported versions. Again, I don't know that this was even being asked for. But, I think if community supported versions of games, if you're worried about if you're worried about community supported versions of games competing against your original game, and if that actually did happen, that would be kind of an indictment on your game, right? Which, I don't know. Again, I go back to Ragnarok because Ragnarok Online is still a game that exists and can be played, and there's still an official version, and there are still a ton of different private server versions. And I think, anytime that I've gone back and played that game, the online private server versions are just far and away the better choice. So, that's a funny point to see for sure. But yeah, forfeiture of licensing and reproduction rights, sure. Again, yeah, copyright of musical works and legal action from rights holders, right? Okay. Not much there. But we come to the bottom of this paper, and they say the importance of consumer protection laws. Notwithstanding the applicable licensing structure, all video games offered to players in the EU are subject to consumer protection laws. Games are licensed to the consumer in accordance with their terms of service. These set out the terms upon which consumers may access and play such games and the situations in which such license rights may be terminated. Consumers are informed that their access to online games and associated services may terminate and are informed with sufficient notice in cases when that does happen. So here are some, tenets here. Transparency. Players must be given reasonable prior notice before any termination of access to their game. Reimbursement. The Digital Content Directive provides consumers with price reduction and reimbursement rights in certain circumstances, but also with repair and replacement rights if a game service fails to achieve conformity with certain required warranties. Service duration. EU legislation requires that the service aspects of online video games be provided for a reasonable amount of time, taking into account all relevant factors. It would be disproportionate for a specific duration to be imposed, as this would need to be valid for all types of services, not just games. Finally, fair terms. The Unfair Terms Directive prohibits games companies from imposing terms on consumers that significantly imbalance the parties' rights and obligations to the detriment of consumers. So I think here, welcome back from ads, I think here the two things to really hone in on here are service duration and fair terms. I think this is a very weak argument to say, disproportionate for a specific duration, because it would need to be valid for all types of services. Because essentially what you're saying then is you're just saying it would be so hard to make this work for all kinds of different services, so we shouldn't do anything. And that's a terrible argument to make. Just a lazy kind of slumped out argument. It sucks. And I think, particularly if you look at like the online service type of thing, again, it all comes down to like when we buy these things and we go out there and we buy it, and sure, the box might say, I'm thinking when we still used to go out and get boxes with CDs, but anyway, ostensibly you still do have boxes, even games with online services. And they will say in there, like, oh, they might say online subscription required or something like that, right? But when you're buying this thing, you're really still, to me, you're getting the sense that this thing is going to last for a while. For the foreseeable future, it's going to be here. And you don't really think about, at some point, it could be cut. And I think it would be great for on the box itself to say that, service duration is not infinite or something, like the service will run for at least 8 years. I don't know, something. There's got to be some sentence that can be put on a box that just acts as a reminder to us to say, you know what? Yeah, that's right. So that if you pick up a box and you go look at something, and you'll read it over and you'll see you'll see this line that reminds you that, oh yeah, that this is okay. This is a license. I'm not getting a physical product. I'm getting a license to use something, and they could take this away from me. And if there was some information on a product that was required to be there and was there, then it would influence my decision making on how I spend my money. And I could very well put that box down and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not vibing with that. Let's go see what else. What other license can I buy that is more likely to last me longer? Because again, value for money. And that's what we were kind of talking about at the top, right? That is king nowadays, is your value for money. As far as the fair terms kind of thing, I think this is another really important thing to look at now, right? Most recently, I think about the Nintendo Switch 2 and the terms of service that are associated with that device. And is that really fair? Right? Is it really fair what they're doing with some of the stuff around bricking people's consoles? Which, I mean, sure, I understand that if your console is being bricked, it means that you probably tried something to, I don't know, not jailbreak, but you might have tried something in terms of modifying the software or really trying to get into the nitty gritty of that system in a way that was not intended. And I can understand why Nintendo wants to try to shut that down. But is that really fair for them to go about the way that they're doing that, where they can press a button in Japan and over here, well, wherever you are, in Brazil, for example, your console gets bricked? And so, you might have heard that Brazil, I think it's a consumer protection agency, is suing Nintendo over that very issue. But similarly, in all these other games that we purchase, or licenses to games that we purchase, rather, we have these extensive license agreements that we have to agree to before we play the game. And in a way that is kind of like, how many times have you just scrolled all the way through that thing and you clicked agree? Because I don't have a choice here, right? My choice is to play the game or not play the game, and I can only make the choice so many times to say oh, well, that license is crap, so I don't want to accept those terms, and therefore I'm not going to play the game. You can only do that so many times. Ultimately, you're going to have to begrudgingly accept something, right? So, I think if we had better license terms for consumers, I think that would be interesting to see what could be done from a regulatory perspective. To maybe, I don't know, increase the ways in which the license can be used. Is the license transferable? If I have a license to this thing, can I openly sell this license to somebody else? If I have a license to this thing, do I have the license to also use it on all kinds of different platforms? If I buy a license to a retro game, can I now emulate it freely and openly? Things like that would be interesting. To say the least, but will we ever get there with regulators? Not likely. But okay. And finally, probably most hilarious of all is how they end this report. Video games companies are committed to the preservations of games and their cultural value, and the support for this is there's one footnote here on how EA recently supported the use of Battlefield 1 in a museum and the use of SimCity. So, hey, I mean, and I guess the second footnote is embracergamesarchive.com, which I wish I didn't click on that, but hey, there we go. But if I come back down to this, so Video Games Europe and their member companies are committed to and actively support serious professional efforts to preserve video games and recognize the industry's creative contributions under circumstances that do not jeopardize the game company's rights under copyright law. Members regularly donate game copies and hardware to preservation organizations and support museum exhibitions featuring games. Other video game companies have undertaken the gigantic task of creating video games libraries to support the preservation of games. So my problem with this whole kind of thing is, especially like this sentence right here, with creating video games libraries to support preservation. That's not what they're doing. They're creating video games libraries to continually commercialize all of the stuff that they have in the past they have been unable to do to date, right? It's why we keep getting all this Nintendo Switch Online stuff, right? And like the constant churn of all this new Nintendo Switch Online stuff is because, they get to have all this old stuff that they know that people can emulate in all kinds of different places without paying any money. And in some cases, the people have the actual physical game, and again, they have the license to the physical game, and so in some respects, it's fair enough. I can emulate it wherever I want. I have the thing, I bought the thing. So I think that's as good of a place as any to stop. They close on a sentence here. However, the industry's innovation and economic activity depends on strong copyright protection for the software and other creative works that are its lifeblood. Preservation efforts should not be confused with uses that could conflict with the normal exploitation of the work by the right holder, or unreasonably prejudice the legitimate interests of the author. So they close on like a very kind of rights-holdy, copyright protection type of angle, which is altogether unsurprising because if you go through this whole thing, they have a huge section on IP rights and potential impacts to IP rights. And really, like, these are like the hard lines that they're trying to draw in the sand when eventually, if they have to go negotiate with regulators, these are the kind of things that they're going to be bringing up, right? Which again, I don't think the Stop Killing Games is trying to do anything with IP rights and all this kind of stuff. They just, we just want to, I should be able to go, I guess there is kind of this thing going on where it's like, we're a bunch of people that are opening up our library on Steam and double clicking on something and feeling like if I click on anything on this list, no matter how long ago I bought it, I should be able to open this up and play this game, and it should function, right? And I guess on the other side, they're saying, well, no, not really. Like if you double click and open up a game from 20 years ago, I went and I got Tribes Ascend on my computer. It's very, you can't really do that anymore. There's a very specific way for you to go and get that if you had played that game before, and you can get that back onto your Steam library, and you connect into this game. You can still somehow connect to servers, so servers still exist somehow, but the game doesn't really function. There's nobody else playing the game. There's no bots or anything like that. I had spent a ton of money in that game from what I can remember, and effectively I can't play it anymore, and that kind of sucks because I have a lot of good memories around that game, right? And so I guess the intent of Stop Killing Games is really to try and go in and say, like, yeah, you should be able to pick up these old games and play them in some fashion. And they talk about different ways in which that can happen. Hey, Telly. But hey, that's going to do it for us today. That's a show. We'll be back again on next Tuesday to talk about video game news.